and Oversight Board this evening. Thank you very much for coming along. My name's Councillor Lisa Homan and I'm Chair of the Board. Welcome to anybody that might be watching on live stream. If you've got any questions about any of the reports that we cover, please put them in the chat and we will try and come back to you at a later date. Before we go any further with the meeting, I've got a few housekeeping matters to raise. If the fire alarms should sound, and they have sounded during this meeting in the past, we need to leave in an orderly fashion and exit down the stairs for anybody that can. Officers will direct you to the assembly points outside of the building. Could I just also make a note for officers? Could you please just introduce yourselves and say who you are and which department you're from when you start speaking on your reports? So I think firstly, I will go to the first agenda item, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence? Lateness from Councillor Helen Rowbottom. She'll be here in a few minutes, I think. The next item on the agenda is the minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 24th of January. Could I first ask if those are agreed as an accurate record of the meeting? Everybody agreed? Is there anything that anybody wants to raise out of them at this point? I think that was the budget meeting, so kind of there weren't any substantive items other than that. Everybody happy to move on? Okay. Oh, declarations of interest. Has anybody got any declarations of interest on any items on the agenda tonight? Nope. Thank you very much. Okay. In that case, I'd like to introduce Mary Lamont, Assistant Director of People and Talent, who is going to introduce our first item this evening, which is the commitment to inclusive recruitment and internal development, progression and retention of key skills within Hammersmith and Fulham. So Mary, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Homan. So yes, my name is Mary Lamont and I'm the Director of People and Talent at Hammersmith and Fulham. I have a few slides to present to you highlighting some of our key programmes and initiatives and successes aligned to our commitment to inclusive recruitment, internal development and progression, and retention of key skills, which are referenced in much more detail in the published reports. I'll just wait for the slides to show.
Everybody see the slide? Oh, they were there. Yeah, right.
Thank you. If we could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of how we reflect our demographics, looking back, there has been some shift, both in resident population and workforce population over the last couple of years. And as a result, we are seeing more closely reflecting the demographics of our residents. This data set is at a very high level. However, we are drilling down to explore the data at a more granular level alongside other London councils to benchmark and understand where we have gaps and what more we need to do. We've recently published our pay gap report, which includes gender, ethnicity and disability, alongside which we have provided a summary of action plans to ensure we continue to make progress against our EDI commitments, our equality, diversity and inclusion commitments. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Sorry about this, Mary, stopping you in your flow.
It's okay, thank you.
We ready?
Yeah, so which slide on there?
This slide, please. Thank you.
Sorry.
It's okay, thank you. So we're running many initiatives and programs to support attraction and retention in a challenging marketplace. We just wanted to highlight some of them. As I say, there's much more detailed in the published report, but we've undertaken a comprehensive review of our inclusive recruitment, onboarding, and induction and exit processes. And we've done this in collaboration with our staff diversity network groups, but also in conjunction with our partners at Microlink. Some of the outputs that have come out of those initiatives include compulsory inclusive hiring manager training, diverse panels, and updated job description templates embedding inclusive language. And that's just some of the real highlights here. There's much more going on as well. Apprenticeships and inclusive apprenticeships, I'll talk about a little bit more, and our supported intern programme, which we roll out as changing lives through learning. Promoting the achievement of care experience leavers is a new initiative that we're currently looking into in terms of a great work experience programme and supporting career pathways. And everything we do is driven by data analytics, and we're getting much more data coming through for us to be really clear about where we do have gaps and what we need to do to fill those gaps. Thank you. In terms of partnership working, this is not extensive by any means. Our success in getting things done and being progressive is much about the way we're partnering up and doing things with others. We work closely and are actively involved with heads of HR, London councils, and the LGA, and we're signed up to various pledges, including the Social Work Pledge, and we're working with the London Innovation and Improvement Alliance around social work and London Technology Innovation around digital. As I say, they're just a couple of highlights. There's many more partnerships that we're involved in, but as you can see, we rely heavily on our partnership working, and we benefit significantly from that. Next slide, please. We are signed up to various charters, and we're seeking accreditation or have already got accreditation with a number of organisations, all of which helps Hammersmith and Fulham to promote itself as an employer of choice, enhancing our employer value proposition. More recently, we've just signed up to Timewise. You will have noticed through the report that our part-time worker numbers are relatively low. Timewise will really help us through networking, through sharing best practice, and through focused working groups and developing action plans to enhance the number of part-time workers that we currently employ. We're doing a little bit better than our neighbouring boroughs by way of comparison, but what we really want to do is have a focus on that going forward and supporting people into the workplace and back into the workplace. Our H&F Academy, sorry, next slide. I've talked a little bit about our H&F Academy, and in particular, we have our apprenticeship programme, which we're really proud of what we've achieved over the last 5 years. Our apprenticeship programme has grown significantly, and I have two of my colleagues here this evening who are going to talk to us about their apprenticeship and employment journey at Hammersmith and Fulham shortly. Our Get Ahead programme is our signature offer to staff to support internal development and progression. It's a unique programme. No manager approval is required to be registered with the Get Ahead programme, and it's once registered, we'll provide support with career conversations, personal development plans, shadowing, CV writing, interview techniques, network opportunities, and marketplace event. That runs alongside our normal PDP process, personal development processes. So it's in addition to what we would offer on the normal basis. Next slide, please. We want to be recognised as a learning organisation, and at H&F, learning is everyone's business. With a number of mandatory training programmes across compliance, health and safety, EDI and wellbeing, and we run regular cohorts of other programmes which are open to all staff. such as the Women's Development Coaching Programme, Emerging Leaders, is open to all, coaching and mentoring. And we're really proud of our Wellbeing Wednesday offer, which has been running since before COVID and the lockdown. We have an extensive suite of online learning, which is available to all staff, which enables staff to learn at any time that suits them. And it's perfect for learning from home, supports new ways of working. During 22-23, we provided an offer of 248 unique online modules, of which we received over 16,000 completions. We have a great Get Ahead offer, but additionally, we complement our learning with essential people management programs. Next slide, please. Our staff diversity networks have been designed to support and embed our culture of inclusion. These groups ensure that we can co-produce workforce initiatives with an emphasis on inclusion and accessibility. Inclusion promotes motivation, well-being, and staff satisfaction, which in turn supports enhanced performance and increased productivity. A number of diverse events are planned throughout the year, many of which are also open to residents to recognise and celebrate progress, but also to raise awareness. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to let you know about some of the awards that we're really proud to be a part of. Hammersmith and Fulham have already been awarded the Race Equality Matters Trailblazer status, and the London Council's Best Contribution by a New Apprentice, won by a Sia sitting next to me here, and she'll talk about that shortly. And we are also shortlisted finalists this year for the LGC Diversity and Inclusion Award, and for 3 categories of the PPMA Excellence in HR Awards. That's for EDI, L&D, and Best TU Collaboration. With that, I would now like to hand you over to Olivia and Asia, who are going to say a few words about their career journeys with us as local resident apprentices. And we're going to start with Olivia.
Thank you both for coming. I'm looking forward to listening to your journeys.
Thank you. So hello everybody, my name's Olivia Finley and I'm a Learning and Development Advisor here in Hammersmith and Fulham Council. When I moved to Hammersmith and Fulham in 2021, we were just leaving the first lockdown of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd graduated from the University of the Arts London in fashion design and was working as a department manager in a retail store on Oxford Street. When I was working as a department manager, I found that a large part of my job was training colleagues in customer service, project knowledge, mandatory and practical training. And over the 5 years I worked in this company, I found that was something I grew to really love. Developing my team and supporting their careers and aspirations quickly became one of the main focuses of my role. At this point, I decided I wanted to gain a qualification in learning and development, and that's when I came across the apprenticeship that Hammersmith and Fulham were offering. I decided to take a risk and leave the career and team that I had spent years developing. I left what I knew I was good at, being one of their top salespersons for the company and a successful career in their organisation, to start my journey and get my qualification with Hammersmith and Fulham. When I was appointed into the role, I knew I had a lot to learn, and this would feel overwhelming at times, but with the excellent support from my managers and my team, I was able to pick up the role quickly. I was trusted to take ownership of big projects and was encouraged to share my ideas and creativity whilst collaborating with new colleagues and teams. I'm very thankful to my manager, who was so supportive of me and who was able to allow me to challenge myself regularly, and I wasn't afraid to fail. My time at Hammersmith and Fulham has taught me more than I could have ever imagined. I recently just finished my final exams for my apprenticeship, and back in December, I applied for a permanent role within my team through Get Ahead, our internal development programme. I was successful in my application, and I'm incredibly proud of the progress I've made so far in the council, and I'm forever thankful of the support and the development that has led me to opportunities such as this. Not only do I get to contribute to a fantastic borough that really cares for its residents, but I get to support our new apprentices in their roles through career conversations and mentoring opportunities, something that's important to me as a resident myself. Soon I'll be helping to mentor a new apprentice in our team and helping them to hopefully follow in my footsteps. I also sit on steering groups for many of our networks and race equality groups, and I get to support the workforce through these channels too. I'm really proud to say that I work for Hammersmith and Fulham, and I'm blessed that at 24 years old, I get to say I have a career that I'm not only passionate about, but it's in an organisation that I love. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you. Hi, my name is Asiya Mahmood, and I am a resourcing and data analyst in corporate services resources. My journey is slightly similar to Olivia's, but my one started when I completed my A-levels and I signed up to university, did the UCAS application process, and I was unsure if I wanted to go through with it. My sister recommended that I attend the National Apprenticeship Week 2021 hosted by People and Talent, and I did attend. It was a virtual event at the time. And during this event, I was able to see apprentices' current experiences and previous apprentices who were retained by the council. They shared their journey, and I felt like that was something that I wanted to give a go. And at the time, I got support from our work zone team, which is now known as H&F Works, and they helped prep me for interviews, they helped prep me for my personal statement, and they gave me the confidence to apply for the job, and which is the job that I ended up getting towards the end of, towards the beginning of my journey. I got a role as a resourcing coordinator in the same team that I'm currently in. I did a business administration qualification, and I was given the opportunity to work on so many different projects and complete my apprenticeship with a distinction, which later enabled me to be able to win the London Council's Best Contribution by a New Apprentice. I was given the opportunity to be a part of multiple different staff network groups like the Young Persons Network, and also be a champion for all 3 of our race working groups, which is something that I'm really passionate about, and giving back and working with residents. After the fact, there was an opportunity in our team in a role in data analyst, and I was given the opportunity to apply for it. And I'm now currently undertaking another apprenticeship, which will help me gain the skills to tackle this area that I'm very passionate about, which is to analyze the data that we have, to make something of it, and, you know, try to understand it better. And that's something that I've already been working on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No,
Stay.
just thank you very much to Olivia and Asiya for being here this evening and taking time out and sharing with us their journeys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I was quite taken by the fact that you kind of both got different backgrounds, really, because you made the decision to walk away from the private sector and come and work for Hammersmith and Fulham. And it sounds like you've really enjoyed and feel that that was a worthwhile move. And you decided kind of not to go to university and come to work for Hammersmith and Fulham. So it's interesting, and it shows that there are different pathways into work. So thank you very much. That's my immediate observation, but thank you very much for sharing with us. And I know there are lots of other apprentices that have got sort of similar stories to tell in the organisation. Before I open it to questions, I think the reason we've got this here this evening is there was a bit of interest around our employment practices and a few questions that came up at the last meeting, which when we discussed the budget, because there were a few questions about staffing and staffing levels and things like that. But also, I think it's really interesting to see the current situation out there in the big wide world in terms of the recruitment and retention of staff. And there's also a very big issue out there in the big wide world in the public services. I'm particularly thinking about the Metropolitan Police in terms of the culture that's embedded in some public organisations. And it seems to me a lot of the work that we're doing is to try to make sure we never get into that position, and we've got a really healthy culture which nurtures people, gets the best out of them, compared to some organisations that are currently struggling. So that's I think it's quite an opportune time to have something about how we look after our staff and how we work with our staff going forward. So on that, I am going to members of the committee to ask questions. Councillor Rowbottom.
Yeah, 15, 20 years trajectory, probably a little bit further afield, but yeah, in terms of attraction and retention, as I said, we've we're doing a lot of work across London councils. We're working with heads of HR. We know that working for local government is really incredibly exciting with so many diverse services. And it's about how we promote that and really get that out there. And for me, the best ambassadors are sitting right here with us today. And so a lot of what we're doing at the moment is going out. It's about our outreach. It's about talking to organisations. It's about talking to our local employers. It's about sharing best practice. So, but it's not about just doing it on our own. We're more powerful as a bigger entity. So it's very much about working with our other London boroughs and sharing what we're doing to promote the very best about local government.
In terms of it mirroring the needs of local government, for instance, we have a climate change department, and
Yes.
the Warwick change scheme where they look at this as well. I wonder how that gets into different departments to actually source the roles or the kind of roles or what the needs.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the other things that we do again across London Council, so we're looking at hard to fill posts. We're looking at hard to fill posts now and in the future. We are also reaching out and working collaboratively with other organisations in terms of, an example would be our food safety officers. At the moment, we know that there's very few universities that are offering qualifications, but we're talking to Barking and Dagenham, who are already talking to Coventry University. And what we'd want to do is talk to our more local establishments around what we can do to support some of those hard to find qualifications out there. And in particular, you know, targeted campaigns around planners, what we're doing with our social workers. We're doing heaps of work with partners around social workers at the moment, and how we can really attract and retain and be competitive around that as well. So there's many more of those right now, but lots going on, as I say, collaboratively. It's not just about Hammersmith and Fulham. I think to really be powerful, we need to collaborate with others.
Councillor Daly.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I really enjoyed listening to your experiences there. I was really impressed to hear that you chose an apprenticeship over going to university. A really canny choice. And I really loved hearing Olivia talking about a culture where you're not afraid to fail. I found that a really positive statement that you made there, a really positive thing. I'm just going to follow on from Councillor Rowbottom's question. I'm chair of the Housing and Homelessness Pack, and I am really interested to know if the embedding of kind of get ahead and the kind of and the culture is equal across all the departments.
So in the answer to that is no, not yet. But that's why we're doing what we're doing in terms of the analytics and the drilling down into the data, and really exploring across the different, even smaller than departments, but into services, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that everybody has access to what we've got on offer in terms of internal progression and development. A really exciting piece of work we're doing at the moment as well is working with our race equality leads for learning and development. They're developing a communication process to develop a bit of a roadshow, if you like, specifically targeted at our frontline service users, because we all know that actually, because they're out on the front line, we need to work harder in terms of engagement. So we're actually going out and doing some road shows, literally targeting our frontline services. So the answer at the moment is no, it isn't, but our aim is that it will be.
Thank you very much.
Any follow up on that? No? Anybody else? Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you very much. Sorry, thank you as well for the presentation. I thought it was really interesting as what's been going on there and how you've progressed your journey into your career. Mary, just a couple of questions to start off with. One is the pie charts that you showed in terms of diversity, inclusion, equality look very good. But I wonder if, in terms of analysing that, that gives the sort of big picture of the council as a whole. What does that look like, or are you still doing it in sort of when you're looking at different scales? Because presumably, you know, what's the sort of picture at senior management level going down through the grades now? I'll leave with that to start with.
Thank you. So yes, we have done some of that, and we have included some of that information in our pay gap reporting. Also with our race equality leads, we've been sort of going out to staff, talking to them about what those pay gaps are showing us, including, you know, we talk about the glass ceiling, and we talk about the further drill down. You're absolutely right. The reason I put the context in there was, yes, you know, accumulatively, we're doing okay. We're reflecting the local demographics, but actually, as we start to drill down a bit, like the question Councillor Daly just asked, you know, there are gaps, and that's what we're doing the analytics for, in order to really understand where those gaps are. So in answer to your question, we have done some of that already, but our aim is to do much more.
Sorry, I may have missed it in the report, but presumably there is still a sort of pay gap. Is that what you're saying in terms of the information that we put out there at the moment?
Yes, there'll always be a pay gap. It's about making sure we're monitoring and putting in actions in place in order to address those pay gaps. But more importantly, it's about, as we say, making sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to be able to progress, whether it be internally with Hammersmith and Fulham or not. It could be wider than that, but it's really and truly making sure that we're able to drill down. We're able to look at the demographics, make sure we're providing the benefits by, you know, having a diverse community that is recognised by our local residents, but also to make sure that we're opening up opportunities for our own staff to be able to internally progress, particularly when we're in an environment where skills for the future are going to be a big challenge for us.
Yeah. Just to sort of go a bit further, some of the issues, so perhaps a few things around retention, perhaps, and I guess you're sort of talking about some of that in terms of the apprenticeships and other things that are in place for people. So I guess, well, we've had COVID-19. Obviously, there are particularly new ways of working for a lot of staff, where they're probably working from home several days a week. How effective has that been at sort of improving retention?
It's been quite significant, actually, we have done a bit of data analytics in terms of what's happened over the past few years leading up to COVID. Our turnover just prior to the lockdown was around 13.8%. That continued to rise up to 14.5%. But during COVID, as many organisations saw, there was very little churn, so that movement just stopped, and so our turnover went down to 10.6%. But by April 22, we started to see that movement. That was, you know, a lot of people then starting to move, and it shot up to around 15.8%. But what we've now seen is that starting to settle. And I'm really pleased to say that we're now back down to 11.3% as our turnover. And anecdotally, we know that it is a lot to do with being able to offer hybrid and flexible working opportunities.
Oh, I mean, that's certainly good to hear, because clearly there's a lot of cost involved in, and I see that you've driven down, or at least it's come down, the cost of agency staff, which is obviously a sort of reflection of hopefully keeping staff, and obviously turnover means that you don't spend more money on recruiting new people all the time. So that's that's clearly a good thing. I mean, in terms of retention, you've obviously got the Get Ahead programme, various other programmes. Obviously, I mean, I guess if you could talk, well, I think you've talked to a certain extent a little bit more about recruiting internally, but to what extent when people leave, are you sort of creating, because you're sort of working with those other local authorities, are they looking for opportunities in similar lines but getting promoted within other local authorities? Because presumably we can do what we can in terms of retaining our own staff, but in a sense, if they're kept within local authority work within London, and maybe we're getting some from other local authorities, then actually we're trading up a pool of skilled staff who can sort of, move between, Hammersmith and Fulham and various other areas.
Yeah.
So we're not entirely starting from scratch in terms of us all having to build up the skills that are needed.
No, we often hear that we're all fishing in the same pool. I can remember many, many years ago where that redeployment happened across boroughs. And interestingly, I was at a heads of HR meeting this week where there were similar conversations in terms of, we know that people are moving. How can we make that more efficient across London? And it sort of aligns a little bit to what we were saying as well in terms of promoting what local government is all about. So there are conversations in terms of more effective, secondments perhaps, or redeployment as opposed to people physically leaving an organisation. But the other thing that's really important for us at Hammersmith and Fulham is, people stay because they really like working here, and that a lot of that is aligned to, the staff satisfaction and engagement. That a lot of people want to work for a common purpose. And, that's one of the things that, having worked here for a number of years, I see and hear a lot of from our workforce and even from our two colleagues here this evening.
No, thank you very much.
Councillor Perez.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Mary, Asiya, and Olivia, for your presentation this evening. Just like what other colleagues have said, it's really good to hear of your journeys, Asiya and Olivia. I think it's really good, that apprenticeship route, which I think it's great to know. I have a question in relation to on page 18, you referred to the different key charters or partner organizations that we're partnering with to promote inclusive recruitment and retention. Can you please tell us a little bit more about these key charters and how do they translate in terms of working practices that make it an accessible and inclusive environment to work with? Thank you.
Thank you. So many of the charters or where we're seeking accreditation require us to demonstrate and provide evidence in terms of, what we're doing and how we're doing it. It's far from being a tick box exercise. But the piece that we really benefit from is around shared practice, networking opportunities, but also developing action plans and being able to deliver on those action plans. And I think the Race at Work Charter is a good example of that. So we signed up to the Race at Work Charter. We developed our race equality groups, and we have some really robust action plans that we are delivering on, supported by those volunteers within those groups. And so all of those, we're quite selective about which ones we look to sign up to, because we absolutely would not want anyone to be seeing this as a tick box exercise. Behind these sits the action plans in terms of the delivery.
Thank you very much. And what about I noticed mention of the different activities throughout the year to raise awareness about certain events. Is there a new initiative around the menopause?
Yes, absolutely. So we've already published our menopause policy as part of our management training. In terms of absence management and wellbeing, we cover the support for managers as part of that. We have had several Wellbeing Wednesday sessions where we've invited our own doctor to come along and talk to staff about the menopause. And we also are celebrating Menopause Awareness Month later on in the year. So absolutely, there's lots going on around menopause.
I think this is a really good initiative. I'm taking as a perimenopausal myself, and
yes,
it's great to hear of this initiative to raise awareness and also to have opportunities for staff to talk about it and to support them. So when we subcontract maybe services with other providers, do we make sure as well that they sign up to some of these charters. So I'm thinking of the living wage
Yes.
employment charter, for example. So do we make sure that if we subcontract services, those providers pay the London living wage?
Yes. Definitely the London living wage, absolutely. And we return a submission every year to report back on that. But we also work really closely with our procurement colleagues in terms of our social value commitments and what we can do there in terms of, for example, we know that Pertemps, our agency provider, is also a Gold Armed Forces Covenant member. So we do quite a bit together in terms of supporting our approach for that. So there'll be examples where we will look in the future around, Race at Work Charter and other charters. So I would say at the moment, yes, we do it to some extent, but not to all. But we are definitely working with our colleagues in procurement in terms of what we can do better in that area.
Anybody else? Councillor Brockman.
Thank you, Chairman. Mary, could we just look at the chart on page 26? It implies that this whole situation was last reported on in November 2020. So these figures are in comparison to November 2020, are they?
Sorry, the chart on
Page 26 at the bottom.
I think
It says the average.
Statistics at the
Yeah.
bottom, don't
Oh,
you?
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, so
Because the third from the bottom, it says last reported November 2020.
yes.
Does that apply to all those statistics?
Not-
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, no, not at all. When we came to a committee meeting back in 2020, we presented some statistics.
Mm.
And what I've presented here is the updated position as of the 3rd of April 2023.
Right, but the little arrows implying that they're going up or down.
or down.
What is the is that last year or?
That's as of 2023, April 2023. That's how we were doing in terms of our workforce profile.
Yes, but you were comparing it to
2020.
It was to 2020.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's the third line down says that staff between 50 to 64 have gone down.
Yes.
And we know that that's an issue nationwide, in
Yes.
fact.
Yes.
And obviously in the council, that is as severe as anywhere else because the build-up of knowledge and so on and so forth
Yes.
is lost if you lose those people. So a lot of this has been targeted at the younger age groups, and well done you two, and getting them started. But how the retention, as Councillor Vaughan kind of mentioned, I think is very important.
Yes.
Particularly in that age group. So what are you doing on that?
Yes, thank you for that question. It is incredibly important that we retain knowledge and skills as much as bringing in new skills and talent. The figures have reduced, but they've reduced slightly, not significantly. And so it provides a more of a balance across the two. But in terms of not losing valuable skills and knowledge, and for encouraging an older workforce to stay in the council or come back to the council, we're also working with the accreditation for age-friendly employer. So that will balance that up.
Could you just tell me a bit more about that?
Yes.
I didn't know about that.
No, so again, it's an accreditation that we're looking for, very similar to the other accreditations whereby we will work with the organisation to demonstrate where we are in terms of what we can offer. And I must say that as a local authority, you know, our flexible offers are good anyway. So, you know, we would expect to see that a lot of what we would want to be providing, we're doing in a sense. But there will also be, again, the opportunities to partner up, to benchmark, to share best practice, to really understand what more we can do to make sure we're getting it right effectively. But that will be, you know, opportunities to consider, options to consider for exploring how we retain or welcome back or encourage back an older workforce. But at the same time, I think it's really important that we keep an eye on the balance of the demographics across the workforce. In the past, you know, we know that working within a local authority, it's been referred to as an aging workforce, and now we're wanting to encourage people back. But at the same time, we really don't want to miss on the opportunity of promoting and encouraging younger people into the workforce as well. So it's getting that balance right.
Yes, look, you've got a very difficult role in trying to balance all the different requirements. Do you think that, I think you said earlier that the workforce profile at the moment does represent the demographic in the borough? Those are the charts on page 16 at the very beginning.
Yeah, interesting.
But if you look at them, they don't quite, to me. Is this something that you're looking to do something about, or are you going to leave it as it is?
No, we'll never leave anything as it is. We're always looking to do better. The tables will show us that, you know, we would never expect to, I don't think, to be matching like for like. A lot of what we do is also around, you know, it's around making sure we've got the right skills and knowledge within the organisation. That's just as important. But it's about monitoring it and making sure that we are reflective, not necessarily matching like for like. But what I would say to you is just that we would never just leave it as it is and not do anything more. We're always looking to do more. And that's always about making sure we can be one of the best and most inclusive councils.
And just finally, when you're interviewing someone for a job, presumably it is based entirely on their qualifications and character, whatever is needed, without positive discrimination.
No, we don't interview through positive discrimination. We interview based on knowledge, skills, competencies, and attitude. I think attitude is really, really important. And again, I'll go back to our colleagues here, you know, around being passionate and wanting to work for Hammersmith and Fulham, but being able to deliver and making sure that they're able to do the job that we're recruiting them to do. And we have robust recruitment processes in place to support that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Trahey.
After the resignation of the draft was really completed, and his denial pretty much
We do indeed. We do indeed. And we take that very, very seriously. One of the great pieces that the staff diversity networks bring with us is the opportunities for safe spaces. We talk a lot about safe spaces. So, you know, yes, we have policies, yes, we have procedures, but we also have generated lots of safe spaces for people to say how they feel and know that we don't tolerate bullying in any form. We take it very seriously, and there are lots of avenues for people to actually raise. You know, there are many avenues, and that could be through the staff groups, through our trade union collaboration, through HR, through their line manager, and through very confidential routes, should that be necessary. And we also introduced everyone to our monitoring officer as well, in terms of being able to raise concerns, workplace concerns.
Okay. Councillor Sui.
Yes, hi, and thank you for coming and for your presentation. Mary, just a comment, picking up on what you said about the charts, as we saw on page 16, and aspiration being to reflect rather than to directly mirror what we have, which I think is important, especially because what we see in the bar charts and what we see at the Institute of Hammersmith Fulham may not be what we councillors perhaps, or the council sees in our inbox. Certain groups tend to be, let's say, overrepresented in their inquiries. And one such group, not just in terms of ethnicity, it's also, for example, council tenants and other people from certain socioeconomic backgrounds. Are these data that we capture about our workforce and the socioeconomic backgrounds that they come from, or whether they, for example, have experience from having lived in council housing? Because I found dealing with officers who have that background very, very helpful when they deal with residents, and residents who appreciate that.
Yes, we have an amazing BI team, and I'm sure Matt's going to tell us more about that later, include it, and they're doing some amazing stuff in terms of analysing the external data and how that reflects internally, but also what we're doing in terms of the internal data. That the drill down is so sophisticated now. It's more about where do you stop. But yes, and I'm sure, Matt, you'll touch on that later.
Perhaps not as directly, Mary, but I mean, we don't really. So amongst as a staff, we will be interested in the experiences of each other. For example, you know, if you lived in council housing, can you bring that to bear to your job, to your role, your projects, etc. But we don't. So you know, any good organization does that, tries to understand its staff, its skills, experience, etc. We do all that, but we don't track or look into, I think you said, socioeconomic kind of characteristics of staff. We don't request that, and nor would we seek to ask that and analyze that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of things that I've picked up from comments that some of the committee members have made. Do we do exit interviews with our staff? I think that kind of in some ways picks up some of what Councillor Brockbank Fowler was saying in terms of, you know, if people are a certain age, you know, what is their reason for leaving? I think it'd also be interesting to see the information, which is probably London-wide, so it's probably London councils rather than ours, exactly where the gaps are. I mean, certainly being a former cabinet member for housing, I know that we had a massive issue at one point in recruiting environmental housing officers. Is that one of the areas where there's a gap that you know, London councils may be looking in terms of working with universities to get those qualifications levels up? So it'd be interesting to see where those gaps are for us. And I think my final point comes back to the kind of the pie charts about gender and ethnicity, etc. And it links to what Councillor Vaughan was asking in terms of, you know, the pay gap issue. So do we find that quite a lot of, for example, women and ethnic minority employees might be doing more of the sort of caring frontline roles, and they're not, you know, the director of adult social care? So I think that's quite an interesting dynamic, and I think that seems to be what a lot of your programs are aiming to try and, you know, work through.
That's absolutely right. Exit interviews, yes, we do undertake exit interviews. Everybody who leaves the organisation is asked to complete an exit interview, either through a form or through a conversation. It's not mandated, but we do gather some data in terms of the exit interview. What we've noticed is that the returns are quite low. So a piece of work that we're actually doing at the moment is to encourage a greater uptake of people completing exit interviews as they leave us, but it is there and we do ask everybody to do that. In terms of the pay gap reporting, yes, again, part of the conversation at London Councils this week at Heads of HR was around the new data sets that we've just been provided, which is broken down into pay bands. So we're able to now drill down into those pay bands and then do even more around where are these, you know, where are our people at these pay bands by ethnicity, by gender, by disability, so that we can then do some really targeted work in terms of the actions that we want to put in place to improve and reduce those gaps. I think there was did I cover all of the questions
I
there?
can't remember because I can't write anything at the moment to
Interviews.
remember which one, what I asked, but we can come back to it in a minute.
Oh, and we do have that information in terms of across London councils in terms of those hard to fill posts. So everybody submitted information for each of their own councils of where they were seeing those posts that were hard to fill. And so we do have some data that is enlightening us in terms of that across the piece, which happy to share.
That would be great if you could circulate it later. Before I ask Councillor Ree if there's anything he'd like to say as sort of cabinet member responsible for this area, we have a member of the public that's been very patiently listening to our questioning. I'm hoping that quite a lot of the things that you raised with me previously in an email, thank you very much, have been covered. But is there anything you would like to ask Mr. Thurlaway? Welcome. You might want to use the mic just for the point of the yeah.
Yes, I think you have all covered what seemed to me to be pretty obvious, where we see we're really doing well in terms of representing the communities we serve. And we're really proud of the race equality work we've been doing. Yet when you look at the graphs, women are overrepresented, not by a great deal, but blacks are significantly overrepresented. And so I don't see how you can say you're doing really well in representing the communities.
Okay. What was there? There is another. That's one point.
The stated aim is to represent the communities, and they're not.
I think some of the debate that we've just had about where in the organisation that I think that might address some of those concerns.
Maybe,
yeah. So thank you for that.
The case,
yeah.
That's not what's on the graphs. But on as well as that, we have the Get Ahead program, which means internal promotions or promotions from inside the organizations, where the graph on page 22 shows that black females are doing very, very well, which doesn't help get back to the stated aim of balancing the demographics.
Are there any...
you say, well, yeah. basically, the white males are significantly underrepresented, and black.
I think we've got the point. I think
so. Yeah. That's what these graphs show, and that's what the aim is stated as being.
I think that would be addressed by looking at the kind of demographics of the different pay grades, which I think is what we were trying to tease out as part of the debate. So yeah, is there any other points different to that you would like to raise before I go to the cabinet member?
Yeah, I'm just then wondering, is the aim, that's the stated aim, is that correct? Is that the correct thing to do? Because my interest is mostly in social housing. And I know that the social housing regulation bill, which is before Parliament, was introduced with cross-party support after green papers and white papers and all the rest of that sort of stuff. And as cross-party support, almost immediately it was tabled, there was an amendment, again with cross-party support, to the effect that the social housing regulator will have powers to make regulations concerning the competence of individuals involved in the management of social housing.
I think this
So
is really a
that's not-
question for the management of
Yeah.
housing services. So I'm not sure Mary can answer that one.
Yeah.
Is there any, one final point? I'll allow you
Okay,
one
well,
final
Yeah,
point.
the staff diversity networks, what is the purpose of them and how do they help the residents who the staff are there to serve?
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for your questions. Mary, do you want to respond to any of that in?
I would just like to mention about the staff. I've already mentioned about the benefits that the staff diversity networks bring in terms of, high staff engagement, motivation, will ensure high performing teams that will provide great services for our residents.
Thank you, Mary. Councillor Ree, this is your kind of cabinet responsibility. Is there any observations or comments that you'd like to make at this stage?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm not sure I can add any more like we've already heard from, particularly from Olivia and Asia. I thought they gave excellent presentations on the work that we're doing in this area and what it was that attracted them to the council. So thank you very much for that. We rightly at these committees often talk about the services that we're providing for residents and the outcomes that residents are getting. And it's right that we do that, but the council is a large, complicated organisation. And so it's also important to turn the focus in on ourselves every now and again and make sure that the way that we're running is appropriate for an organisation of our size and nature. And I think actually what we've seen today is that actually Mary and the team are doing a fantastic job and rightly are being recognised externally for the work that they're doing. It's really important to have the best people working for Hammersmith and Fulham, because that means that down the line we get better services for residents. We've got better people working to deliver more innovative, new, more effective programmes and providing services in a way that meets their needs in the most appropriate way. We want to make sure that we're attracting the best people, and it sounds like we've got some great examples of getting people from backgrounds that perhaps councils, fishing in pools that councils don't necessarily always fish in, but also keeping the best people as well. There can be lots of temptations to go off into other areas once you've learned a whole set of skills here in Hammersmith and Fulham, and so it's important that we can retain talent when we get it and when we find it. I wanted to say a word as well on the importance of a diverse and an inclusive workforce. Right? The point of it, as Mary says, it's not a tick box exercise. We're not doing this to try and make sure that every number on the table is the same as residents. That the benefit of having a diverse workforce is that you avoid groupthink, but also you're better placed if people from different backgrounds with different experiences, with different areas of knowledge are able to contribute to decision making within an organisation. They're better able to spot risks and to spot opportunities. And so encouraging people from a whole range of backgrounds, from a whole with different areas of expertise to get involved in the council, and a culture that makes them feel that they want to contribute as well. That's the best way to make sure that we have a particularly effective council. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know if Councillor Harvey, you've got any comments with your, no, okay, thank you. I remembered the question that I couldn't write down now, and that was about the contractors. Going back, somebody mentioned the contractors, and obviously the contractors have apprenticeships as well. So I was just going to ask how we monitor those, and it's more than about just a living wage. It's about good employment practices and encouraging apprenticeships, etc., within our contractors. So that's a question that I didn't write down, so I forgot it.
We work really closely with our colleagues in economic development, in terms of our contractors and our offer to residents across local employers, apprenticeship starts. We record the numbers in relation to our commitments for our contractors to commit to bring in apprentices on board as part of those contractual obligations. And I do believe that there is colleagues from economic development will be coming to a later meeting to bring some more information around the industrial strategy and the employment piece separate to this. But what I can say is that we work really closely with economic development in terms of our offer, because it's great in terms of that, as I say, that collaborative working, whereby we can share best practice even with internal colleagues, and likewise they can help us benefit in terms of what they're doing as well. But just to encapsulate the numbers, that in terms of our expectations around social value commitments through the contractor piece is embedded within our contracts. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but we do that.
Okay, thank you. I think there's probably a couple bits of data that would be really useful for actions to come back to the committee. And I think certainly when we're kind of looking at stats next year, it may well be good to have an update to see how these things are going. And I'd be very interested in seeing, as Councillor Brockbank-Fowler raised, the strategy that you're putting into place to kind of try and retain older workers. I think that would be really useful for us to see at some point as well. So unless anybody else has missed the boat on something they really want to desperately ask about, could I thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Isia and Olivia, for your contributions. It's always nice to see real people that have done some of these things in real life and to hear your stories. So thank you so much for coming. Much appreciated. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll just give it 30 seconds. Okay, the next item we've got is looking back on the work of the board in 2022, 2023. And I think we have Matt Sells is going to briefly talk to this report, which I think will be quite a brief report, but some of the themes that we've been looking at will be continuing. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I was just going to give a short introduction to it. And I open it up, of course, to the board for any comments on it. So it's a report that looks back at the achievements of the board in the last financial year, and also looks forward to this financial year. And there's a couple of things seeking board approval of, which is its terms of reference, which is in Appendix 1 of the report, and also any further sort of nominations for strategic issues that the board might consider in the year ahead. And that's explored from paragraph 26 in the report. In terms of looking back, the board and the various invited guests that came in for some of the main items have made lots of valuable comments on our response to the cost of living crisis, which was considered at December's board. Those comments and that discussion will continue to inform the delivery of the programme in coming months, as it remains a priority area for the council. But the report does provide members with an update on our response programme since your consideration of it in December. And that's in terms of the support we're providing to residents in need, in terms of digital inclusion, and also the Cost of Living Alliance. And Councillor Harvey is with us today also as the lead member for our cost of living response to provide any further context to it. We continue to have a wide-ranging and comprehensive programme of work in place to support residents and businesses through the cost of living crisis. The report in December really is the main place still that outlines that. Yeah, there's those kind of updates in this report. So yeah, we're seeking board approval for its terms of reference for the year ahead and any strategic issues for consideration beyond what's already set out in the report.
So perhaps Councillor Brockbank-Fowler.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought that we were going to be getting reports from all the other scrutinies in our overview.
But there is a report on the agenda covering it. It's
Oh, the
last report.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought
Yeah.
we were doing this under this.
Yeah, no,
No.
it's the last report tonight. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay,
Does
lovely.
that help?
Yep, that does. Yeah.
Okay. So before we can take any questions or comments, I think, shall we just agree that we are happy to approve the terms of reference for the next municipal year? Is everybody happy with the it's basic? I don't think there was any changes from this year, are there? So
There was just one change, which was for this board to agree any task finish groups under any of the other packs.
right, okay, that sounds sensible. Is everybody happy with approving the terms of reference? Agreed?
Yeah.
Yep, great, thank you very much. So does anybody like to make any comments about what we've done over the last year? It's obviously we only set up less than a year ago now, so it's all been quite a learning curve and a new experience, but I think we have done some useful strategic work. Cost of living kind of just went with us. It wasn't something that we decided was a piece of work that it was really strategically important to the council. We must do it on day one. It kind of events sort of overtook us, and I think focusing in on that at this committee was really helpful. And ever since we have done the piece of work on the digital inclusion, I think officers and residents have really appreciated the fact that this piece of work is going to be truly co-produced by the time it comes up through SLT and up through cabinet. So we have had quite an influence on that final report when it finally does come through to cabinet. And I'm quite pleased that it was an issue that I kind of picked up because it was cross-cutting across all of the packs. And I think all of you have probably come across barriers and come across issues in relation to digital inclusion. So I think that's worked really well. And obviously we've got a couple of strategic issues to go forward on for the next year as well. But does anybody want to raise anything sort of over their observations over the previous year before we kind of move on? Councillor Daly.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to say something about the cost of living crisis piece that we did. Cost of living and how people survive poverty in this borough, I think, is really crucial, and it cuts across all of our policy and accountability committees, education, health, housing, across all of them. We talked a lot about cost of living and how that followed on from the pandemic, but I think that without making an overtly political point, those two events had a major impact on poverty in the borough, but there was an overall trend. And looking now, 34% of children in the north of the borough are living in poverty, and a real concentration of poverty in Lillian, West Kensington, and the south of the borough. And I think that is that focus really, I think, should be quite a regular piece for this committee to look at, given that it does touch across all of us, and we can all have an input into how that's managed.
And it might be interesting when we get to the next report that we've got on the census. I think some of the census data, when it's broken down to ward levels and area levels, might actually reflect the importance of what you've just said, actually, Councillor Daly. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to? Councillor Vaughan.
I mean, just to make comment, Chair, that I think that the being able to get a series of experts in and to consider some cross-cutting issues at greater depth has been helpful, I think, hopefully in terms of the policy development role that this committee definitely has. So I think if we can aim to keep that up as much as possible when getting in some of some of the experts and people who want to contribute on co-production is a great one to do next. I think I think that will help. That will really help, because we had some very good discussions guided by people who are working in the field. So I think that helps in terms of the policy development that we're aiming to do.
Thank you, Councillor Vaughan. Anybody else want to come in? Councillor Harvey, I don't know, as you're the cost of living lead here, I don't know if you want to make any comments about the work that the committee's contributed to that.
Yeah, I think it's been really great to have everyone's contribution, and it gives us an opportunity to sort of step back and look at what we're doing and what we're delivering and other better ways of doing it. So thank you. And I would just add to thank all the officers involved, because they've worked immensely hard, especially with our voluntary sector, to help residents.
Thank you. Okay, so on that, is everybody happy to kind of just note the report, I think? Yeah. Great, thank you very much. Well, because we approved the terms of reference, but it's noting the rest of the report. So thank you very much. So I'm now going to move on to the next big item on the agenda, which is the census briefing, which I think is going to give us a lot of food for thought. So I think we have Joe Howe. Joe, welcome. I think you are going to do the main presentation on this. I think that's what I've been advised. So when you're ready, over to you.
So I was going to introduce it, Chair, if that's okay.
Please do. Yeah, sorry. Why passing you?
No. Why not? And then I'll introduce Joe. So yeah, this is an item on the census. There's a report, a covering report, and then there's a detailed appendix, which Joe's going to speak on in a moment. So that picks out just some of the key kind of data emerging from the census thus far, and some key findings for consideration for this board. The report also outlines the team's plans to analyse further data as it's released from the census, so that we can all better understand the borough and how residents are living in the borough. Joe's going to talk a bit about plans for new ward profiles in your ward councillor roles, which I'm sure you'll be very interested in, which is planned for later this year. And that will really help ward councillors across the borough to better understand their residents' lives and what's going on in their borough. And then finally, I'm going to hand over to Joe now. That's just going to pick up on the key census findings before opening it up for comments.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. I'm Jo Ham, business manager here. So just a bit of context about the census that happened way back actually in March 2021. So when the pandemic kind of we were still in restrictions. The ONS are releasing the census in a bit of a different way for this time. So they're going through a phased approach. So we've got some of the key headlines and key bits on the topic summaries and some information by ward. But over the rest of the summer, we're going to expect a lot more of the kind of nitty gritty, more in-depth data as well. So I'm just going to briefly take you through some of the context on the census and what that means in terms of where we were at that time in the pandemic. Take you through some of the kind of key headlines of what we know so far, and then, as Matt said, briefly take you through our plans. So really looking for input and views on shaping that as well today. So back in March 21, there were 183,000 what's known as usual residents. I'm referring to page 43, by the way, if you want to follow. So that represents quite a small increase over the last 10 years, so 0.4%. So when we talk about usual residents, this is quite specific when the census means this. So they're talking about residents that are either have been in the borough for 12 months or plan to stay for 12 months. So that kind of puts into context those shorter term residents aren't included in that. So although there have been small increases overall, we've seen some large differences by ward. So Hammersmith Broadway's an increase of 20% and Sands End 18%, with some decrease in West Kensington and Avonmore by a decrease of 11% and 9% respectively. Kind of the overall picture is about half of wards we're seeing an increase and half a decrease, and there's quite a big range in that as well. So just be conscious. So obviously the census was done at a time in the pandemic, and this definitely had an impact on what our population was looking like at that time. Hammersmith and Fulham, as you know, has a very mobile population, and this has kind of continued to be the trend. We think that's had an impact on our overall kind of change over that 10-year period, why we're seeing smaller differences and the bigger ranges among wards. We kind of estimate based on our council tax figures, that's about 6,200 households. It might be underestimating that by. But whilst there are challenges with the census, we still see it as kind of one of the most robust kind of pieces of information, and gives a real rich picture of what our residents are like and how they're living and working in the borough. So then just briefly on the kind of key trends and findings. So we still remain a very typical inner London borough with a high proportion of young professionals. And again, very mobile, with ranked fifth in the country in terms of our mobility of our population. So I'm just going to take you through 4 of the key kind of changes. So these are on pages 44 and 45. So one of the first around kind of fewer younger families that we're seeing, and we've seen a particular decrease in under 5-year-olds. And this is kind of in time with longer term trends and trends that are being seen in London as well. So this largest kind of household type remains singles living by themselves. So almost a third of people in the borough living alone, but we have seen an increase in couples cohabiting, and actually an increase in marriage, which is against the London trend too. Our resident population is also becoming a lot more diverse. So almost half our population was actually born outside of the UK. So back in 2011, French population was the highest. That's now changed to Italy. So 5,500 Italians, 5,000 French here as well. And they tend to have been here for a long time too. Again, our ethnic groups, as you saw also with marriage trends, have really changed as well. So we're really diverse, with 62% of our residents identifying as non-white British. And these are concentrated in White City and Brook Green as well, with particularly high proportions. And then just lastly, the private rented sector has grown a lot. So over a third of our residents are now in private rented. We're seeing a fall in home ownership as well. That's similar to the trends across London. And we're not too far off in terms of a third of our households being private rented. So those are just some of the key kind of highlights. In terms of our kind of future plans, we've included some of our products and work we're going to be doing over the next year. So those on 48 and 49. Our kind of two key outputs that we're looking at developing is something around equalities, and looking at that deprivation angle and going into more of the data once we have it later this year. And then also working on our interactive ward profiles. So having something on the website that you can interact with and understand the data as well, with some PDFs. So we're actually got a first draft at the moment. So looking at doing that in a phased approach throughout the summer as more data comes available, and trying to keep that, well, keeping it up to date as more the latest data is released as well. So we're looking for kind of comments and thoughts on these proposed plans, and also some of those key findings. And we would also really welcome engagement in the development of some of the products as well. So thanks.
Thank you. Officer wants to say anything else at this stage? No? Okay. So I think for this committee, some of the data that comes out of the census is actually quite critical in terms of the strategies that we might want to be looking at going forward. So I would ask members of the committee to think about what you think in terms of is most useful for us to be looking at, either strategically as a committee, because there are trends, and Councillor Daly just picked up on you know, some pockets of poverty that are obviously emerging more recently, which we probably weren't kind of pinpointing before. But also what would be useful to us as ward councillors in terms of the information we would like to see officers draw up in those ward profiles? What is it we want to know about our wards that will help us serve as councillors and serve our residents and our constituents? So those are sort of the key questions, I think, to ask. I think one question for me to just throw in: how much do we weave in this with the sort of more regular data that comes up on the Office of National Statistics? Because obviously that's a key data source for any local authority. Lots of data sets there which are regularly updated. And I think we supply a lot of the data to them in the first place, don't we? But is there anything that they can tell us, and it's not just about us supplying them data?
Well, you know,
Stymied you.
there's sources through ONS or other government data sets which might be reliant from survey data. That's things, you know, that we can't. English Housing Survey, Private Landlord Survey. There's a lot of on the economic kind of data as well, Labour Force Survey. There's a lot of survey work that we rely on and can draw on. That survey work's not taking place locally. That'd be something I would refer to.
I guess one of the key things is the indices of multiple deprivation. So something that's pulled together using multiple data sources. So I think it's where the government looked at bringing some of the data that we provide together to offer us kind of richer insights about our communities. So we're expecting a release of that. They do that every 4 years later this year. So that will give us a much richer, up-to-date picture on the deprivation and how that's changed as well. So that's one of the key products. And I think we also use the census across our kind of BI suite. So when we're looking at children's rates, populations is used. So it's kind of matching those data sets across as well to get best value out of them.
Thank you. Okay, questions from Councillor Daly.
Thank you. Can I ask a question about the census itself? You started off saying that it was March 2021 and the end of a long and quite tedious cold lockdown. Anecdotally, I imagine some people had left London. Do we have total faith in the figures that we've got in front of us? And if not, what are the implications of that?
Good question. So I think we need to, and we've been stepping back and reflecting, and there's two things here. Do we think the census is accurate as of Census Day, the 21st of March? And I don't think we've got sufficient evidence to challenge that. And the ONS obviously uses very tried and tested, detailed, complex, mathematical, statistical modelling as part of census, kind of the 10-year census of population. So there's that first point. The second is, do we think the census is a true and accurate representation of our population? And that is where we don't think it is, because for the very reasons you just set out, Councillor Daly, that there were residents, there were families in the borough who the census day was during the third lockdown, where families and individuals had reassessed where they lived, how they lived, etc. And, you know, this is on the back of course, Brexit as well. So we think there that the census won't provide a true and accurate representation of our population. And we are working with other boroughs and making representations to government around that, working with Councillor Ree as the lead cabinet member for this area. But yeah, we are concerned, as Joe said, you know, our estimate from around April 21 is that it might underestimate the population by about 14,500 people. But we're still learning. More and more data is being released, and we need to consider that over coming weeks and months to update it.
Thank you. That's very interesting. That's a follow-up question. It occurred to me that obviously there would be some real groups that weren't here that would normally be here. So students in particular probably fled from London and weren't seen again for some time later. There were reports, and some of the figures that were released in this tranche point to a tripling of empty homes in the borough. Now they put a figure on something like 11,600 homes. And I wondered if you thought that in some of the tranches that follow up, there might be more evidence and more detail on that. And we can sort of talk about sort of assumptions that we can make on some of those. But I just wondered if you imagined that there would be more information following up, or whether that is something that we will need to investigate ourselves.
So thank you for that question. Thanks for alerting us to it. So just a bit of context, and this follows Milan has done some good work on this in the last few days, and it might be something, Councillor Daly, that will come back to you just with a written email if that would be helpful. So yeah, you're alerting to some census data suggesting there's 11,700 unoccupied dwellings in the borough. So they're not necessarily the same as empty, but in census classification, they're unoccupied. Joe, do you want to just talk about, we've looked into the number and if we can explain it, but we can provide some written update after the meeting.
It's a complicated picture, but kind of broadly, from looking at council tax information that we have, we can kind of account for some of those empty dwellings based on kind of how they're reporting their council tax. So about 2,000 of those, just over, were considered second homes, and we can email you this detail as well. About 1,000 that were genuinely empty, as reported. There are about 3,000 that are known as kind of exempt dwellings. So there's a range of things where people are in prison or they're too ill to be at home, so they're exempt. And 1,300 of those short-term residents. So where I described those usual residents, a proportion of those would be considered to be kind of short-term lets, but those are just of those residents who are not born in the UK. So that leaves about 4,300 that we don't know. And I think it is very challenging, this, because by the definition of their emptiness, we don't know a lot about them because they didn't respond to the census. It is an estimate from the ONS, so that's part of it. But the reasons around kind of what people were doing during the pandemic, and we've spoken to other London boroughs that have similar kind of thoughts around this, is that the very mobile population, people moving to their kind of second homes, and also people kind of relocating back. So we saw actually a decrease, particularly a halving of our New Zealand and Australian residents that are over here. As just one example, maybe EU as well. So that might factor into it. The second factor is around the change in the number of houses we've been building over the last 10 years in the borough, and what that means for kind of empty areas. So we're looking at where there were particular pockets of higher rates of empty place, and they are around those new developments. So as they're being developed, you're expecting those houses to kind of be in that process of being sold, rented. So there is a bit of that factor. I think what's challenging is we don't necessarily know exactly what that's made up of. I think when the ONS are also releasing, they'll be releasing mid-year estimates. We were expecting those in the summer, but they've been delayed to September. But I think we'll understand it a little bit more next year when we have the mid-year estimates for 2023 in 2024. We'll have a better picture on what that looks like in terms of the migration. But I think I would say it will continue to be a challenge for the ONS, and they said this in conversations that we've had with them, to estimate the population in an accurate way because of the challenges around that pandemic position, because that is what they use as the basis for all future projections. That was very detailed, but I hope that answered your question.
That was a really great answer. Thank you. I suppose the kind of the two areas that sort of immediately spring to mind that we might be missing residents is possibly overseas developments, overseas owners, investors. And the other area that, and I don't know what the multiple points of data are for Airbnb, but I did see that Airbnb in London is up 571%. And I think the nature of it's changed from residents having people for a weekend to actually driving businesses out of homes. And I don't want to take over the entire meeting, but I'd be really interested to see if we can find any other data points, or if there are likely to be any other data points come out on those particular areas.
Before you come back on that, I know Councillor Ree wants to come in. Also, I think the fact that there's lots of figures in there which show the private rented sector's up. So obviously there's quite a churn. So that could mean more voids on census day as well. You know, there's so many complicated angles to this, which I don't think we're ever going to get to the bottom of it. But obviously the headline is, yeah, frightening, but you really do need to delve down. I think Councillor Ree wanted to come in. Okay, Councillor Perez. I wasn't paying attention on who was. Sorry.
Sorry, I thought we were going to get a response on the housing point. I just wanted to make a slightly more general point about Councillor Daly's question on the consequences of data not necessarily being right. And there are big consequences in that funding from central government can depend on some of the figures that come from this. You're absolutely right to point out that lots of people moved away from London at this period. I know people who went to go and live with family because perhaps they were living in, multiple people living in small cramped places in London where their family had big gardens outside the city. So lots of people would have gone back. We know that students weren't in central London because halls of residence weren't necessarily taking people. And one of the big themes that we've seen in the data is that there's a decrease in the number of young people. I don't think the two are not connected. So it really is important that decisions are taken based on good data, and you don't get bad decisions based on bad data. As Matt mentioned, we've coordinated a letter with other inner London boroughs who are facing similar issues to the Department for Local Governments, just asking them to make sure that they take these issues into account when it comes to funding in the future. And I think it's going to be really important that going forward, we do hold their feet to the fire on this and make sure that residents aren't losing out because of the situation in which the survey was taken. We know in Scotland, for instance, it was delayed by a year. And it would be interesting to see what the results would have been like if perhaps we'd had our census in 2022 rather than 2021, but it's an unknown, right? So yes, we'll very much be making sure that this is followed up on and making the case for funding here in HNF.
Thanks. Sorry, Councillor Slew.
Hi, thank you. Just a question. Of course, we've had in the last year boundary changes, and I was wondering to what extent that affects your data, especially when comparing with 2011. To take an extreme example, we didn't have Walham Green ward, of course, in 2011, and it's a ward created out of 3 different wards. So how accurate are comparisons across time in this instance and in other cases? Because more or less all the wards have changed to a big or lesser extent.
Yeah, so we get the 2011 data remapped against the new ward boundaries. So changes in boundaries won't impact any of the kind of key trends for that.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. Can I just do then so is the plan with the platform, let's say the database for the wards profiles, that it will be continually updated as you get new data coming in? Okay, I can see from your nodding that yes, that is the answer. And can I just ask, with the index of multiple deprivation, if we know when that will be coming and all the various indices, and also with the, I know, for example, we had the ONS releases data every now and then about different areas, or does a sort of mid-term review. I think 2018 was the last time, in 2017. Do we have a timeline of when we expect more data, or will there be updating figures as we go along, or are we doing our own estimates between now and 2031, I guess?
Yeah, so we're expecting IMD release in the autumn. So we'll get that new information, and then we'll have mid-year estimates. So they were due to be released June, July, but they've delayed that to September. And then we expect another mid-year estimate for next year back. So they're always working a year backwards. Those will be based on the census with other data. We are going to get more detailed information on the actual census. So they're releasing that as we kind of speak. So we're going to get tables. So we'll have further information on, for example, like ethnicity by tenure. So you get that kind of deeper level. Yeah, sorry, I've just forgotten what I was going to say. It'll come back to me.
Have you got any further questions?
No, not yet. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Perez.
Thank you, Chair. So if I heard correctly, the census may have made 14,000 a bit more residents. So if this is the case, are there wards in particular where you think these residents are? And are there potential concerns in terms of the social infrastructure that we need to meet the needs of those communities that are not counted? So have we got enough provision for primary health care services, schools? So, I mean, are there any concerns around that social infrastructure that may be needed for those that are not counted? Also, I'm aware that there are some communities that feel somehow invisible, and I say this from having worked with the Latin American community. There has been a massive campaign for more than 10 years with the Office of National Statistics, ONS, asking them to include in the qualities monitoring data the Latin American as a category, which and they have said no. So I know that community in particular feels invisible and feels that they're not listened to, they're not heard, and if they're not counted, they feel that that may have an impact in terms of some of the services that they can access as well. So have we got the means as a local authority as well to maybe reach out to those communities that may feel, not only Latin Americans, but other communities within the like Asian minority ethnic category that want to be recognized and maybe want to be involved? Thank you.
So in terms of your first question, I think, was around our estimate, and it's an estimate, 14,500 missing people. Where might they be in the borough? That was your question.
And also, I mean, if it's a big number, have we got concerns in terms of provision of services? So access to primary healthcare provision, for example.
Yeah, so no, we don't know where they might have been across the borough. We haven't done that thinking, or we haven't reported on. I suppose we would know, but we've not looked at it, have we? Have we looked at it?
Yeah, so we know the big changes by ward. I think what's challenging is understanding where it's genuine change compared to the expectation that there might be some return, but there are some factors that we can understand that will give us indications of that. So, for example, West Kensington, Avonmore have seen the biggest decreases, but they have higher proportions of private renters living in those areas. So we don't know for sure, but it might suggest that that's an area where those kind of missing, if you like, residents are. but we can provide more detail in terms of what that picture looks like by ward.
So we haven't considered the sort of social infrastructure implications of any of this. I mean, our planning policy looks at that, you know, ensuring new developments provide the right social infrastructure through the community investment levy or whatever it is. We haven't really looked at that or considered that from a census perspective. And in terms of your third question about engagement with the Latin American,
that may not be counted. They may just fall into the group of the BAME category. But
yeah. So we did a lot of work with the ONS in advance of the census around, but which was I'm just trying to recall, Milan. That was also impacted by COVID, but we did, you know, about how they could communicate and talk to particular communities in the borough which were harder to count. So there was quite a lot of work that was done there. There was some community advisors, I don't recall for the Latin American community, but for example, for Somali community was one that had a community advisor to try and encourage that community to respond to the census. But we do in the council more broadly have a community engagement team. It's not under me, it's a separate bit, and they are the team that does quite a lot of active engagement with different community groups across the borough, including those that represent particular kind of ethnic groups. So I don't know if that might be something of interest to you, but there's a community engagement team.
Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I should say, first of all, a very interesting presentation. So thank you for putting all these slides together. Clearly, fascinating subject in itself. Very much look forward to seeing the sort of interactive maps and the data that comes from there. I mean, one of the things is, I wonder how much analysis, if you could just explain how much further analysis you're going to. So, for example, I was interested to see that seemed to be an increase, or at least H&F has got sort of better health. People reporting very good or good health is like 87%, which is actually above both London and the national average. But I just wondered where that sort of, what other data correlates with that, because we seem to have given that sort of younger people seem to be slightly less represented in these figures, possibly because the population's declined for some of the reasons we might have discussed already, and the elderly population increased, perhaps only marginally. What was sort of driving that in effect? I mean, or is it a case of that is a sort of self-reported number, so it is sort of reasonably subjective in some ways?
Thank you, Councillor Wolf's very good question. So the ONS do age standardised health kind of questions as well, accounting for those factors. So even when we account for those, we've seen an increase in overall very good health. I think when I talk about the more detailed kind of tables that we're expecting, I think we can really dig into some of the ranges and disparity across the borough, because there are differences among different kind of smaller geographies. So that's something that we could look at providing more detail and analysis around in the future as part of our plans, if that would be of interest as well.
I was just going to add, and it would also be a question of, it is self-reported, and it would also, and it was a slightly surprising thing, maybe in the context of COVID, actually, that people still reported that their health to be better. That was, what surprises me, but it is self-reported. The team will look at it alongside other data. So Joe mentioned earlier the index of multiple deprivation. That's got a health index as part of it. So we will be doing comparison between data to look if that can help us explain it. And it could, of course, be because of some local policies that have been taken in supporting residents around their health and well-being. There could be a whole heap of different factors at play there, and it could be a positive kind of reinforcement of local policy as well.
Yeah, I mean, so just taking that as an example, very interested to see how you break down, because you're sort of the map of when people are reporting bad or very bad health that you've got in the slides shows very, well, at least it stands out at least, a very marked sort of geography that is there, which I guess in terms of going to more so sort of broader policy is maybe there's a question of targeting public health initiatives in, well, may not be a surprise in certain areas, but also potentially, I mean, again, it's a bit difficult from it being self-reported, but what are the sort of drivers of good health in a sense? If people are reporting that they're in good or very good health, are there sort of lessons from elsewhere that can then be employed either in those or other areas, or learning that we can continue to take from that? So, I mean, interested to the extent that you're able to provide some of that analysis when you go deeper into the data. But thank you very much for all this.
There's obviously the issue about infrastructure and funding for health as well. If people are all saying they're very healthy, does that mean we lose out on health funding coming into the borough somewhere? So there's those issues as well. Councillor Brockbank-Fowler.
Just one comment on that. Perhaps because people were filling it in while they were all at home and working from home, they felt a lot better. I mean, you know, but look, we're looking at all aspects of it, and if you put some of the COVID people moving away and so on, some of that information in the data, I'm convinced that if somebody comes back and fills in a form like that, and they've not just got off the tube, that they're probably feeling better than they might have said on a different day. Anyway, that's an aside. One further thing, obviously the decrease in young primary school children has been going on for some time. And obviously that's what the council needs to be aware about, because there are, and they have been for quite a number of years, too many school places that are vacant in the borough. And obviously that has an effect for funding.
Don't know if anybody wants to come on that. I think everybody's aware of that situation. And it's obviously got an infrastructure issue. Yeah. Okay, does anybody else want to ask any questions? Anything you think were possibly missing in terms of what ward councillors might see at some point? Councillor Daly, thank you.
I just to quickly, you sort of asked what would be useful as a councillor to have. The information on how many people in the ward are in social secure tenants and how many are private rentals is interesting. It's also really interesting to have that overlaid with information about how many of those are using housing benefit to pay for that private rental. It gives you a better idea of how people are living. Private rental covers a huge array of types of housing. So I think something that drills down into some of those figures would be really interesting. Thank you.
Is that possible?
Yes, that's definitely possible.
Excellent.
We've got benefits broken down by ward. We currently produce reports on universal credit and claimant accounts. And if there's anything else in terms of not just what the census is there, but added value bits of information, we can look at building that in over time as well.
Councillor Trahey.
Sorry, can I just add to that? The overcrowding and also undercrowding, like with the spare room issue. I know in Wormholt, we've probably got overcrowding, but in parts of the borough, I imagine, you know, apart from empty properties, there's probably spare room properties, that sort of thing. So it just sort of shows the demarcation. That would be useful.
Thank you. Any other suggestions, Councillor Sluice?
Yes, just from experience having used the ward profiles in the past extensively, and thank you so much. It's like meeting my heroes, having, yes, especially Milan. It would be, especially if we have an online platform now that gets updated, it would be helpful to have the primary sources that you use as a sort of, you know, so that we can dwell into the data even more if needed. Yeah, that would be helpful, I think. Thank you.
Councillor Perez.
Thinking not just around the topic of health, it would be good to know I mean, is there enough access to health provision? Also, social care. Do we know as well how many people may need social care who may not be accessing social care? Is that something that can be?
The silent people.
We can definitely look into that with my colleagues in adult social care. We have a BI team looking at that and children's across to see, look at some comparisons. So we'll get back to you on that question.
I think there's kind of been a few suggestions, and it would be really interesting if you could just feed back on what is the art of the impossible and what might be really difficult. And I think also, you know, you're all pack chairs here, so you've all got your own particular areas. So if there's interesting statistics that you've drawn out of this sort of headline stuff we've been talking about today, and you want to drill down on it in your packs, and I think particularly around the health issue, there's quite a lot of health issues. So if you've got time to drill down in it in your packs, but certainly if people are enthusiastic, it is, you know, we can bring something back here as well around those sort of issues. So anybody else want to ask questions before? Councillor Vaughan, no? Councillor Reid, did you want to comment on this before I move to the next item?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think this really is a hugely important topic. You know, you can't manage what you don't measure, is my motto, and the census does give us a huge amount of data. Yes, it's data from a snapshot, but a period in time, but there's an awful lot of really useful data that can help us target where we deliver services, that can help us identify particular issues within the borough, and makes us more effective as a council and as individual councillors as well. Yeah, I think the data is going to become more and more important in terms of all of our lives, and making sure that the council is well placed to use that is a particular priority of mine. The work Matt and his team are doing is absolutely fantastic, and it's making a real difference to the borough. So I just want to thank the team, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we come up with next. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ree, and we look forward to getting a little bit more information on some of the things that we know that you can bring back. So thank you very much for coming and presenting that. Thank you. Okay, we now have the report of the various packs, which I think Councillor Brockbank Fowler was alluding to earlier. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about this, but I think maybe should I just firstly ask any of the pack chairs, is there anything that you would like to bring particular attention to in the sort of write-ups of your packs? I noticed, Councillor Vaughan, you seem to have been extremely busy. It was a very extensive write-up in your area. I don't know, does anybody want to raise anything from their packs? Councillor Rowbottom?
Thank you. I just wanted to particularly flag to represent the excellence of our children education teams that on our school performance report for Ofsted, 100% received good or outstanding status. So just wanted to celebrate that again in another forum. Thank you.
Councillor Brockbank Fowler. Yeah.
I remember at one of the earlier meetings, I mentioned whether you were going to look at the exam performance statistics from our school, and you agreed that at the right time of year, which I presume would be your September pack, whether you were going to do that.
Certainly, I think I did commit to that, and
You did,
would
yeah.
look forward to doing so.
Lovely, good. No, it's just obviously it doesn't go past July, so I just wanted to flag that for September.
Yeah, happy to.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Were there any other points, Councillor Brockbank Fowler, that you wanted to raise from that?
No.
Could I ask Councillor Sloop, what's a hexagon? It's in the report and I don't know what it is. I'd be very interested to know. Could you explain to me, please?
Yes, so it's if I could explain it in amazing detail as we had, I would probably join the force. It's a very interesting new innovative approach that the Met Police have in order to tackle crime and other issues in a specific area. and they're using hexagons as the sort of geographical catchment area that helps them deal with this, and it captures everything from not just crime statistics, but socioeconomic data and other figures that they have, such as housing, and they're sort of applying it across different areas. It's a new way of them dealing with different areas. I'm sure the question was asked at committee, why hexagon and not something else, but I do not remember the answer. They're sort of trying it in Hammersmith and Fulham, not in every part of the country. And I think, if I remember correctly, that some of the areas that using the hexagon for around Shepherd's Bush Green, around let's say Lyric Square or Ashcroft Square, housing, and in South Fulham, sort of areas where we all understand that perhaps they have more perhaps crime hotspots or youth crime hotspots, but they're sort of given a holistic approach to them. Hope that answers the question.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I just read it and I thought, I'm not sure what that covers, but yeah. Okay, so we've got, it was remiss of me. I think looking back, we also had a couple of issues flagged for our forward programme, which is looking at co-production, which is very much cross-cutting and very much in line of what we have been already doing in some of the work that we've been doing. So, for example, digital inclusion, that's been very co-produced, and there's a lot of other very good work going on across the council. But I think that we as a committee should look at that strategically, so that it kind of gets embedded across all of the packs, but also we make sure that it is working council-wide, because that's the objective. So that is an issue that's going to be coming back. The Councillor Sluse, you want to?
No.
Okay. And the other issue that we are trying to have a look at is how we work intergenerationally. So that's another strategic issue that will be coming back, I think, in September. But looking at the packs, there are a few emerging issues, which I think you're possibly going to raise with me now.
Indeed. Yes, I think it's mentioned in the report about our future meetings. We have certain plans for our July meeting, but this obviously events have overtaken them. And as it's mentioned that the leader has already proposed the idea that we have a special sort of meeting to discuss the Baroness case review on the Met Police and practices in greater detail, and ideally to invite residents and representative of community groups and people from across the community to come and join and give their views. We're still, discussing the details and both the format and when it will take place. If, for example, will take place on the 26th of July when we have our next pack, or if it will be a sort of special meeting before that. Of course, as soon as we have information, we'll share that. But it would be great if, committee chairs could join us, because it will be an important meeting for the community as a whole, and that's for us as a council and as committee chairs.
And it is a really big issue for your pack to cover. So there may be some outcomes from that meeting which we could be taking up at this level, or that some of the other pack chairs might wish to take up. So I think we've got, three pretty strong themes there going forward. And obviously we won't lose sight of the work that we've already done either. So unless anybody else has got any burning suggestions or comments they want to make on the pack report, can I ask if that's noted? Great, thank you very much. So I think that just leaves me to remind you of the dates of the next meetings. So the next one is the 20th of June, and they're on the, well, I haven't got the number on the page, but they're on the last item 8 on the agenda, covering note the dates going forward. But next one's on 20th of June. So, but I thank everybody for coming and your contributions. Thank you very much.